You are listening to the White Cloud Mystic Podcast. I am your host, Nicole, and this is episode 12, How to Balance Emotions with Magic. This episode, I discuss using magic in general, as well as specifically how to use it to balance emotions. And I am offering 2 different rituals for you to do to assist you in balancing your emotions. Let's begin. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast episodes, you will know that we have been working with emotions on an energetic level. And working with just energy is all fine and good, and it can be really powerful and immediate, but sometimes we need something a little bit more tangible or earthy or grounded. And that is where working with magic is really helpful for self-growth and discovery and understanding. People can use magic for any number of intentions, and using them to support your emotional well-being is just as a valid reason for using magic as is doing a ritual for gaining wealth and prosperity or health or any number of the more typical material acquisitional kind of work. And for this podcast episode, we will be looking at using magic with the intent of balancing our emotions. And to balance an emotion requires first that we accept and allow whatever the uncomfortable emotion is to exist within us. And then we call in its opposite. We allow ourselves to receive its opposite energy and then allow that balanced energy to flourish in our daily life experience. So that is the intent and angle that we are approaching the discussion of magic today. So let's jump right into discussion about working with magic. To do something with magic requires a few things. The first of all is your intent. And the intent is the purpose of your magical act, your ritual, your spell work. You have something that you would like to add to your life or that you would like to have leave your life. The intent is the purpose. And having a clear intent before you do any magical work is very important. It helps you stay focused and it drives your personal creator energy toward one clear focus versus kind of like a muddled spray out of desires. Is when we kind of just approach magic in a blurry way, the response will be blurry back. So we would like to focus our intent very clearly before we do any magical act. So once we have an intent in mind, the next step is to decide what type of materials you would like to work with. Would you like to work with plants and herbs, with crystals, with candles, with energies in nature? The tools and practices available to someone doing magic are boundless. It can be whatever your creative mind comes up with, because essentially magic is connecting your internal world, your thoughts and your desires, with an outer world symbolic representation of what it is you're working with. For example, if we are working with emotions, maybe we would choose to work with water, as our emotional world seems very fluid, very changeable, and water has those properties also. And as an element, water is often associated with the emotional world for that as well. So you can approach your magical ritual on a very personal level. You can decide what you would like to do completely intuitively. You don't necessarily have to look up the proper correspondences or what other people are doing. It can be truly what feels proper to you. So you can just do it based on what you feel is correct. And with that power and intent and belief that whatever you choose is the perfect magical ritual for you, it makes it so. So that is something to bear in mind. You can also look up any number of pre-created rituals. You can find many books, you can find many blogs. There are an endless number of potential magical tools and rituals available for people. And within that, there are very simple rituals that are available. For example, in this episode, I will be introducing working with an herb and making a tea of that herb. So that's a very simple ritual you could do. And there are incredibly complex rituals with many steps. And again, it is kind of what suits you in your personal moment of need and desire to do the magical ritual. But I would like to speak on the difference of that a little bit right now. You could have the same exact results with a very simple magical act as with a very complex and many-stepped, perfectly timed ritual as well. And the biggest difference is the strength of will of the magical practitioner. Somebody who is incredibly well tuned, they have focus, they have that magical presence, they've developed it, they have their strength of will, they can adopt the magical personality, and they have an iron strength belief system in their abilities. They don't necessarily need to do a very complex ritual. They can do a very simple one and have amazing results. Somebody who is maybe newer to working with magic may feel more comfortable working with a lot of different tools, a lot of different statements, and maybe magical motions, a more complex ritual overall. They may feel that there's more power there available to them to bring their desire into creation. So for that person, doing a more complex ritual might be necessary to give them that level of belief. And this is not to say that if someone does a complex ritual that they are using those things as a crutch or they need them or they're not well developed. That's not true at all either. It's also a personal preference. Maybe they have more fun making it a little bit more dramatic, having more of that flair. It could enhance their practice. It could really just be a part of their personal enjoyment. So there's that aspect too of just like really creating this beautiful magical ritual for the pleasure of it as well as the potency of it. And again, the opposite is true. If someone finds real pleasure in focusing very deeply on maybe one or two parts of a ritual, then that works great for them and that's all they really need. So as you are exploring magical acts that you would like to do to work with anything in general, bear that in mind. You are unique, and so whatever feels comfortable for you will be perfect for you. So truly trust that, because we are each our own powerful individual co-creators of this space, and we all have the potential to connect with and produce from the magical personality, the creator energy. It takes that belief system. So the next step may be, but doesn't necessarily have to be, is choosing when to do the magical act. Some people like to time their magic with the moon phases. So that would be working either with the new moon, with setting an intention that you would like to have grow. Some people associate that with the full moon. And there's also the dark moon, those few days where the moon is fully waning to its darkest hours. And that is often involved with releasing something. So there is associating your work with the moon phases. There's also seasonal work, a certain day of the week. If you have the ability and the knowledge of astrological elections, you could really spend a lot of time choosing the proper timing for your magical ritual or act. And you can also contact people who do astrological elections, and they can help find the proper time and date for you to do whatever it is you'd like to do. However, again, I would say that you can be very specific with timing, or you can trust your intuition and your strength of will and not necessarily worry about that. However, there is a caveat to this. I would say if you are not putting the thoughtfulness into choosing the time for your magical act, I would recommend that you then really spend a lot of extra personal time creating the time around your magical ritual or act to be very sacred, to be in a very deeply meditative state, to really respect what it is you are bringing into the world. So basically, not to jump into a ritual just because it's like it feels like a quick fix, or to not approach it from a frenzied energy simply because you're not necessarily creating from your soul presence, your magical personality, your creator energy that is simply creating out of the mind. And the mind doesn't really have a lot of strength as far as bringing things into manifestation. You need a little bit more than just a passing thought. So moving on, we've covered our intent is very important. Choosing the symbols, the tools, what it is you'd like to work with. Timing. The next step before doing your magical act is choosing the space. And the space that you do a magical act, again, can be really simple or it can be really complex. And this goes to however you would like and prefer. If you're going really simple, it can be anywhere. It could be in your house. But setting the space is not just environmental. It is setting the energetic space around yourself. And to create a calm, energetic space around yourself does require the individual to go in to a meditative state and center within themselves and to bring their spiritual self forward and let their ego, their mind, their distracted self kind of sit in the background. So setting space, whether it's inside, outside, someplace really simple or really ornate, the most important thing is setting your energetic space within and around yourself. Personally, when I do magical acts, I like to create a sphere of protection around myself. And this is just an energetic sphere. So I create it by imagining it to be there, by visualizing it, by willing it to be there. And for me, I like to work with a golden translucent, so this like shimmery gold energy. And I don't necessarily see it in my mind's eye, though I am a visual person, so I can, but I wouldn't have to. I could just use my intent to create it around myself, and it goes all the way above, below, all the way around me. And I can expand it or contract it however I'd like. But this sphere, I set it up where only the things that are for my highest and best good can enter that sphere. And everything that is not for my highest and best good bounces right off. Those of you who have done my guided meditations, you will be familiar with this because we often create these in my guided meditations. So you may already have that habit built in just from doing them in the meditations. So that is another level of creating space. You can create the space by being calm and present, as well as intentionally creating an energetic space around you that is infused with the energy you would like to work within, such as the golden sphere of protection, letting only those things that are for the highest and best good in. So those are your prep work for getting ready and being ready to do your magical ritual, your magical act. The next step would be to go into a meditative state or a quiet observational state. If you are someone who does divination, it's that divination state. If you're someone who does a lot of devotional or gratitude work, it's that kind of awe space. If you're someone who does power of now and you're used to getting into your presence, that space, your centeredness, it's going in. It's getting into the creator space of your energy that you have, that everybody has. Ideally, you would find that space before you do your magical activity, because it is from that space that you are your most potent as a co-creator in this world. So this can take practice to develop the ability to adopt that magical personality, is what some people call it, and that comes with time. I've also noticed that the energy of self-care, if you have intentionally done something for self-care before, that is a really good space too to work out of. If you've ever pampered yourself intentionally, like this is just for me to like take care of yourself, that energy is really wonderful to work out of too. So if you're not familiar with the other states, go for that one. So now I'm going to introduce one ritual that you could do to work with balancing your emotions. And anybody can do this one. It simply involves making an herbal tea. And you can find these herbs, you can do it loose leaf. Personally, ideally, I like working with loose leaf and making sure that they're grown organically. But I know that we don't all have access to that. And so whatever you can find, the highest quality you can find and afford, go for that. But it is your intent and your belief behind it. So if you can only work with something that's not as awesome, that's okay. I will also have this ritual linked below. I've written it out and posted it on my personal website, so you can find it there later. So this ritual is around the intent of balancing a certain emotion that maybe you have been experiencing what seems like too much of. It's an emotion that is not letting up, or it just seems to consume you constantly. And you are doing your best to work with it, to ignore it, to distract from it. However you're trying to cope with it, this ritual is for that. The herbs that I've chosen to work with for this particular ritual are herbs that create a physical response in us, an energetic response when we consume them. If you are someone who has worked with the magical correspondence of herbs, these may not pair up exactly with those magical correspondences. However, I'm really one for experiential healing and work, so that is why I've chosen these herbs in the list linked below. You may choose to time this ritual for a Monday, which is the moon's day, and the moon is often associated with our emotional well-being and our emotional state. You could also time this ritual with a full moon, or whichever moon phase that you feel fits properly. Personally, I would do this either as a new moon intention, under the impression that I intend this balance, the emotional balance, to grow over time, or I would do it at a full moon to have the full expression of the balanced energy, that I am desiring to experience the full expression of balance. So either of those would work great. Or again, if you don't find it practical to time this ritual with a day of the week or moon cycle or astrological election, that is fine. Just spend a little bit more time setting this space around it. So what we're going to do for this ritual is we are going to pinpoint what emotion we are having a hard time balancing, and we are going to look up on a list of herbs what is the herb that is the opposite of that. For example, let's say that you're someone who's working with balancing anger, and so we would look up what herbs represent the opposite of anger. For this example, we'll go with chamomile, and chamomile can bring a very peaceful, tranquility kind of energy. And intuitively, I have received that peace is a close opposite of anger, and so I'm going to pair that for this example. So for the ritual, it's pretty simple. You would have your herb, your chamomile, ready, and you would fill your kettle or a pot of water to heat up to boil. I wouldn't use a microwave to heat your water to do spiritual work, simply because the water, when it is in the microwave, it is getting incredibly aggravated in there. So it's already being charged with an energy, and that's not necessarily what you would like to add to yourself. So choose a more natural method of heating your water. And you have your chamomile, either loose leaf or bagged tea available. And you have a cup. I would go ahead and find whichever cup you really enjoy drinking out of. I know some of us have favorite mugs, so go ahead and go for your favorite mug or your fanciest cup, if that brings a little bit more fun and flair to the ritual for you. So find a cup that you would really like to work with, and that's all you need. So you have these objects, and you then would set your space. You can do that by creating the golden translucent sphere around yourself. You can set the energy that way. You could, if you're someone who likes to burn herbs, to do a smoke cleanse, you could do that to just kind of clear and settle yourself in. You could do a few moments of meditation, or you could go into that self-care mind space that I talked about before. So viewing this ritual as an act of self-care, and that can help bring you into a really great space to work from. So you're going to set your space, and you're going to make sure that you're focused. You're not really just rushing through this. You're doing this with intent. So it's kind of a serious moment, and you're giving it that proper recognition by setting your space. So you have your objects, you've set your space, and then you go ahead and you fill up your kettle or your pot with your water, and you can already begin to set your intent with that process. Water represents our emotions, our emotional fluidity, the state of our ever-changing vibrational field. So filling up that with the water, you're already going into the magical state. You can be heating it up, and you can be reflecting on the emotion that you are working with. So in our example is anger. You can bring up the energy of anger. You can actually bring it into yourself. You can look at the water as it's beginning to boil, and you can just connect with anger and the boiling water and imbue it that way. You are intentionally bringing in anger, and that is part of this ritual. Because when we are doing this, we are not here to banish anger by any means. We are here to accept it, that it exists, and we're going to balance it. So as you are preparing your water, you are bringing in that energy, the And it may not be anger. You might be working with depression or anxiety or grief. Whatever it is you're working with, go ahead and permeate that energy throughout yourself and the water. You're working with this intentionally. And I have a list of the herbs and the opposite herbs listed again at that link below if you're working with anything that's not anger for this example. So the next step, once your water is boiling, you will be putting your herb into your cup. And for this process, I like to use a tea reading technique that I learned, and it is with loose leaf tea. And you could cut open, I believe it's about 2 tea bags. If you're working with a tea bag, you can cut it open so you have the loose leaf available to you if you want to do this. You don't have to. So you would take, it's about a teaspoon of your herb, and you would place it in your hand, and you can work with it. You can be crumbling it in one hand, so you have your palm open, you have your chamomile, the little chamomile flowers, and you're crumbling them, and you're setting your intent now, because soon you're going to add the water. And the phrasing that I would use for this, and it's again linked below, I would use these words as my intent. I am accepting anger, and I am ready to receive its opposite in my life, so that I may have balance. So I would do that, and that would be my intent. Again, it would be, I am accepting anger, and I am ready to receive its opposite in my life, so that I may have balance. So doing that, crumbling the leaves, and then you put the crumbled leaves or flowers into your cup, you pour in your water, and what we're doing here is we're blending. We're blending in the emotion, the emotional energy, and then we are mixing that in with our symbolic opposite, as well as the pairings of these herbs help to evoke an actual physiological change in our being. So in a way we're going to be drinking the opposite energy, so it's a really nice mix. And then we let it steep. You can let it steep for, depending on the herb, some people would go 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And during this time, you are just sitting in it, sitting in the moment, this beautiful act of a ritual. And if you would like to journal during this time, you can, or you can keep your focus really strong that you are bringing in balance and visualizing the energy of anger, the energy of peace, and really connecting with how they are blending together in this cup. So you could do that. And then when you are ready, you don't need to strain out the leaves. They'll just kind of settle at the bottom as they steep. And you can go ahead and sip the tea, and you can just continue this ritual space. You are sipping in the balanced energy now, this whole energy, and allowing yourself to experience that blend of energies, the mixture, as well as realizing that by being open to receive both energies, you already have a lot of the one, the anger, and now you're open to receive its opposite. You're open to receive peace so that you can balance. You've learned about anger, and now you are ready to balance it with peace. So it's this dual acceptance process. Once you get close to the bottom, the leaves will be there at the bottom, and you don't have to continue drinking. If you actually were someone who has tea reading experience and you wanted to do this whole ritual with a tea leaf reading cup and go ahead and do a reading after that, you could, and I imagine it would be a very powerful reading. as well as if you are someone who does tarot or a different form of divination, you can have those tools available to you for this whole process. I would just say to do your divination after you have had the tea, so you can keep your intent very focused. So after you've had your tea, you can then kind of sit back, just like let whatever images come to you, maybe some information about a life change kind of comes to mind. Like, oh, maybe my anger is kind of stemming from this situation, or like this change that I could probably make. Be really aware of what kind of comes to you after this sort of ritual. And if you were a journaler, write that down. You could take this time to do divination and go even further to help explore the intuitive messages that are coming to you. And then just trust that you have done some really powerful spell work and that you have accepted the energy of anger, of depression, of anxiety, whatever it is you're working with, as well as opened yourself, truly opened yourself to begin to receive its opposite. Moving forward after this ritual, you could then begin to intentionally look for the way the world is showing you that opposite energy. Now that you are ready to receive the opposite energy, you'll have to have open eyes, open heart to observe it. Observe those moments. And this could be a really great journal practice too. If you carry around a little notebook or even in your phone in the note section, just maybe keeping track of some of the synchronicities of the opposite energy when it occurs. So you can see that, yes, there are these moments of balance in your life and the ritual has worked and you are experiencing it, you're receiving it. That can be some wonderful validation, especially if you are a little bit newer to magic. Sometimes we really would like to see immediate results, and by observing, like actually observing the world around you, you very quickly see the results, especially with work like this, where your emotional experience is the manifestation versus maybe something that's in the physical world or something a little bit more concrete. So this can help build your trust in magic. Now I'll do one more example of a ritual that you could do to help balance your emotions. This one has to do with working with candles, simply because personally I really enjoy working with candles. There's just something about being able to light a candle and it brings me to that space very quickly. There's something very sacred about the connection we have with fire and symbolically the light of fire and the light within ourselves. As well as, now that I'm thinking about it, the flame, it moves a lot, it's very fluid, and our emotional state can flicker, it can sputter, it can move. So tying in that symbolism works nicely for this too. I am someone who likes to work with nature, and so I often work with herbs or oils or things that I find out where I live, which I live out in a forest. So some of my favorite work with candles has actually been in creating my own candles using melting beeswax and adding things into the candle mold that correspond with the work that I'm doing. For this example, we'll go simple. I know that not everybody has access to gear to make candles. If you do, awesome, you can go the step further and create your own. If not, you can just go and pick up a candle, a simple candle that you'd like to work with over time. For this, you would want to pick up a candle that is unscented. If you would like to work with a color, that is fine. Whatever you feel fits is perfectly fine. Personally, I am very sensitive to parabens and chemicals, so I always go with beeswax because that burns really clean. And beeswax also ionizes the air, so it actually is kind of purifying the air around it when it burns. So it's kind of like a twofold cool process. They're a little bit more expensive, but personally, they are totally worth it. So for you, it is finding a candle, and I would recommend getting one that is not in a glass container because we are going to be adding oil to it. So get one that you can kind of work with out of a container. It can be a taper, it can be any shape, as long as it's not completely kind of covered up with a container. So for this ritual, you would have your candle, and we are going to be, again, working with the opposite energy of the emotion that we have in excess. Essentially, we will be taking our candle and choosing an anointing oil, and this can be any essential oil that you have. You would take a few drops of the essential oil that represents the opposite energy, and you would just kind of rub it on the outside of your candle. For this magical working, you can do the typical magical correspondence. I have a link out for magical correspondences that way, or you could do it the herbal remedy sort of way. So, like for the teas, where it affects your physical body in a certain way, it creates a reaction. So, if you have, like, for example, you're working with anger and you have lavender, and lavender helps bring a very peaceful energy to you when you are smelling it, go ahead and work with that. That is perfectly fine for this ritual. This ritual is similar to the last one I described. You can choose a day or time that fits a Monday to work with the moon, or the new moon, or the full moon, depending on your belief system. If you have the ability to do an astrological election, go ahead and do that. Or if you have a friend who's practicing, ask them what day would be great, what time and day. The doing work with astrological elections, however, you'll have to be ready that sometimes the best time and day is actually at like 2:50 at night on a Tuesday. So they could be very powerful times, incredibly powerful. But you got to be ready for doing the work at any hour. The next step then is to have your candle, to have your oils, to have your time. You would then set your space. You would create your golden sphere around yourself or whatever energy you like to work with. And you would again go to that meditative state, the self-care energy, the divination energy, the magical personality, whatever you are familiar with working with, go into that space. And you would then hold your candle and your oil, and you would begin to bring in the energy that you have in excess. So if we're working with anger again, you would bring in your anger. You would allow it to come in, and you would kind of believe and imagine that your anger is going into the candle, that the candle has that energy in it. You would then take your oil and you would realize that the opposite energy is there in the oil. And you would begin to sense what that opposite is. So let's say you're working with lavender and that peaceful energy of lavender. You could then smell the lavender, and it brings that kind of soothing energy, that peaceful energy. You would then take the oil and rub it onto the candle, so you're kind of blending the two energies now. You have the anger and you have the peaceful tranquility energy of the lavender, and you blending them together. Now that you have this blended energy of a candle, with the oil, you would set it in a safe container, a candle holder, whatever is safe to burn. And I trust you to do this wisely, as it's fire. You're working with fire. And when you go to light your candle, you would say, I am accepting anger, and I am ready to receive its opposite in my life, so that I may have balance. And you would light your candle. And then you would just kind of allow that energy to experience this new balanced energy. It should be a very kind of heightened experience because you are reaching out in your emotional body. You're reaching out energetically. You are sensing anger, you are sensing peace, and you're coming to this whole balance. And the lighting of the candle represents that you are willing to receive both, that you are awakened to these balanced energies. So you can go ahead and sit in that space. You can allow the candle to burn for a while. You could do a meditation. You could watch the flames. Some people enjoy watching the flame of a candle. You could also observe the wax, the way the wax is dripping. Start to observe any symbolism, any messages that are coming to you that way. If you are new to any divination, you can just kind of allow yourself to stay present, but receive any thoughts or messages about maybe lifestyle changes or maybe things in your past that you have yet to work through and accept. So there's that, and being mindful of what is coming to you. If you would like to do other forms of divination at this time, go ahead. But staying with that intent of being able to receive the balance. So any messages that you are receiving, they're to assist you in balancing your emotions. That is kind of the angle that you would be reading and receiving at. If you would like, you can allow the candle to burn all the way down. I know certain practices, they like to then take the candle and you could put it in some soil to give it the respect of returning it to the earth. Or you could use something to snuff the candle to use at a later time if you don't want to burn the whole candle at once. We don't typically use our breath to blow out candles in magical practices, as that is using one element or the breath of life to take away that light. So you would use something to snuff it out. It could be a spoon, or if you actually have a proper candle snuffer, you could do that. You could even just kind of put a cup over it so there's no more air to do the fire. That's up to you. And then the next step after that is, again, going through your life now, open to receive how this ritual is playing out, how the world around you is speaking to you and showing you the opposite energy, because that is what you asked for. You said you were open to receive the opposite energy, so you need to stay open. You need to be in an observational state and ready to see and receive it so that you may find balance. So you can find both of these rituals written out. The statement I make is the same in both. I have the magical correspondences as well as the more just physiological herbal remedies. Again, you can seek out any ritual that speaks to you. If neither of these are quite what you would like to work with, you can create your own. You can use someone else's work, modify it. But the biggest point I'd like to make, again, is that we are not banishing, we are balancing. We are accepting both sides. We are allowing the experience to be whole and well, because we are here to experience emotions, to learn from them, to grow from them, and to accept them as part of this beautiful world game, life game that we are playing. So do bear that in mind when you are looking at other example rituals. If you have enjoyed this topic and this style of episode, please comment below if you like hearing about potential rituals you could do in a more magical aspect, as it's really enjoyable for me to create this kind of work as well. If you would like to help support my work here in the podcast and my guided meditations, you can sign up to do a monthly gift through Patreon, and that can be as small as $5, or you could do a single donation through the Ko-fi link below. Your financial support helps to balance what I give in these spheres as well as receive. So talking about balance, it's important in all aspects of life. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.